Hi, I'm Les Wilson. I'm a bike advocate at bocafirst.org. This is my presentation to the Boca Raton Pedestrian and Bike Advisory Board. And the topic today is the Camino Square Phase 2 project and its effect on the pedestrian and bike infrastructure in the Camino Real and Camino Gardens Boulevard intersection. Some of the key takeaways from our look at Addison Meisner is how in 2025 we're experiencing growth in participation because of e-mobility, in particular e-bikes as alternatives to driving a car, especially on shorter errands. Embedded retail is another situation where residents can avoid car trips and gain the quality of life improvements because the infrastructure allows them to safely use alternatives. Classically designed infrastructure is something that starts to break when there's a high participation rate. And what I mean is this illustration over on the right side where this zigzag and turning just doesn't work and things clog up and you end up with people on street, as well as it doesn't support bidirectionality. We really have to stop looking at infrastructure in terms of people and bicycles flowing like traffic does, everybody in their proper lane and direction. That's not reality. And I think looking at the infrastructure in and around Camino Square, for that to be a successful thing for them and for the community, we need to take a different look at infrastructure. This is the big picture or the context in which the Camino Square project exists. Phase 1 has already been built up, and Phase 2 is now looking at a combination of retail and residential to go in that green section there. In purple, I've denoted the areas just immediately around it that are multifamily and workforce affordable houses. These are residents that need to move through this intersection many times in something other than a car. And then you have the economic driver of the large swath in yellow of single-family homes that also need to move through that intersection, but also are an economic driver for whatever retail the Camino Square project wants to bring in, and are users of the retail that is already there. And there's also commercial businesses and workplaces in that whole area. So we all have a vested interest in this project being successful. In red, I've added the only bike lanes that are in this area, and these are just painted on the side of the road type of bike lanes, nothing protected to speak of, but they are used. The one on Camino Gardens Boulevard in particular is one of the few ways you can move all the way across Boca Raton to the ocean. Lastly, the train for FEC and Brightline presents quality of life issues for residents and affects how traffic is moved through this intersection effectively. Now, when I look at this property, having lived there since 1999, I'm familiar with the way it was back in the day and its 70s era design that put the retail in the wrong place, basically. But I also go through here and I view it perhaps differently than those who just look at it on satellite view and their GIS systems. There actually is as much frontage on this end of the Camino Square property as there is for Fresh Market on the other side of Camino Real and the Walgreens Plaza on the other side. However, it has the additional advantage actually of frontage viewed from eastbound traffic on Camino Real because it includes the pocket park that's there. And so that pocket park is controlled by Camino Square, and It does in fact present about 100 feet of visual frontage. Let me show you what I mean. So if you're coming up on the left lane of Camino Real westbound, this is the 300 feet of visual frontage with trees on the Camino property that could be modified so that they don't block any retail that's at that end of the property. And you can also see the leasing sign. The natural place to put the leasing sign is right there in this frontage area. This is the view from the right side of that westbound lane. Still, you get a large 300-foot section of frontage visible to drivers coming up that way. And then flipping it around, if you're coming eastbound on Camino Real, there is the 100 feet of the side of that pocket park, which is very visible, not blocked by the Valero station, and it is where you have access to the alternate entrance into Camino Square via Southwest 3rd Avenue. Lastly, even if you miss that left turn, I mean, commuters know what's coming up. Commuters know where there's places for those pit stops in the morning or in the evening, and clearly residents that live there and go through there all the time know how to navigate these roads. And so as someone who has lived there all these years, if it were me and I missed that light at 3rd Avenue, I can make a U-turn where I've labeled it as number 1, and now I have 2 options for merging right and going in the main entrance or going up to the light in 3rd Avenue. Number 2 is go through the light, navigate through the left turn lane, and make a U-turn on the tracks. Hopefully I don't have to wait for a train, and then come back. That's really the worst way to go. And then number 3 is the smarter way, I believe, and that is to, in fact, make a right turn on Camino Gardens Boulevard and then U-turn at the end of the island. Come back, and Bob's your uncle. You're back in line to go in either of the 2 entrances. And then the 4th way, if you're on your toes, is to go straight, and you can make a U-turn within 100 feet and come back through the intersection, and you're there. And then lastly, Trader Joe's does not have any frontage on Federal Highway, but you go there and it's jam-packed all the time. Okay, so now if we look at the infrastructure, this is a satellite view showing the retail that's south of Camino Real, and then where Phase 2 would join Phase 1 in yellow. And in red are all the lanes of traffic that you have to go over in order to move between the 2. So future residents of Phase 2 that want to take advantage of the bank, Fresh Market, Walgreens, they need to go over all of those lanes of traffic. And the change in plan of Phase 2 from being largely retail oriented to being actually almost 400 units of residential requires the transfer of office equivalents into this section of the CRA, which starts to bring up questions about whether the infrastructure can in fact handle it, even though it was greatly improved when Phase 1 was done pre-COVID. Now, there's often talk about traffic being vested, but what I want to pose is the question about pedestrian and bike infrastructure and whether or not we really got pedestrian and bike infrastructure there that is going to facilitate the kind of walkable CRA that we're spending millions of dollars in consultants and bringing in Jeff Speck to figure out a solution for. This is the time where we can stop ourselves from creating another unwalkable section of CRA, especially one so perfectly primed with embedded retail, the economic drivers of residential that don't have to cross over Dixie and the tracks and Federal Highway to get to the CRA. This is a section of the CRA that all of that economic force has access to, if only this intersection will stomach it. All right. Now, this is also a very walkable thing. Even in the hot Florida sun, it is a short walk between these two, if facilitated by the bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And I believe you'll see that what is there now is not good. All right, so this is an occurrence that commuters and residents have to deal with. This is the reality of post phase one of Camino Square. A train going through the intersection will still back up the traffic past this light. It was worse before the change to the infrastructure. So this is the case of a 5-minute FEC train. I was able to get through this light before I had to stop. But to the left is the Valero station and Southwest 3rd Avenue. Interestingly, I went back, and all my times through this section, I have noticed that workforce commuters are frequently, if not like close to 90% of the time, running counterflow on the north side of Camino Real. So this is back to the conversation about pedestrian and bike users don't behave like cars. And in this case, there was a driver who was headed eastbound who chose to make a U-turn at the light, and because of the physics of his car, ended up on the sidewalk as I approached, which also blocked that pickup truck from making a right turn, and he wasn't too happy about that. But here we are, tra-la-laing along the sidewalk, and we hit another example of design that could be improved. So I have that ramp to get down to the street, but I can't continue on the sidewalk. I have to come over into where there might be cars lined up and become a pedestrian and work through those two hard turns to get back on the path, all the while at barely enough speed to maintain upright momentum. Now, if we take a closer look at the infrastructure that's here, in yellow dotted lines is the only pedestrian bike route between Camino Square and the retail on the south. That's it. Otherwise, you're on the street. It's a 6-foot sidewalk all the way, everywhere. And in order to get from Camino Square across Camino Real, you have to navigate 5 crosswalks. Only 2 of those crosswalks are signalized. And then the one that isn't signalized is in fact a high-speed right turn lane where cars tend to start accelerating in order to continue their journey westbound, right there in the curve. Then, compounding things a little bit further, the bike lane that's there is a keyhole because the bike lane has to go straight through this. And so you have cars wanting to get into that high-speed right turn lane being cut off by cyclists who have to cross over that lane to stay in the bike lane. And then you have cars merging in as well, which you'll see in a moment. All right, so let's look at the pedestrian crosswalks there. This is a video that shows navigating from the Camino Square project to the other side of Camino Real. These hard right turns are such that you really have to consume the entire 6-foot sidewalk in a bike. So there's crosswalk 1, up and down and up. Crosswalk 2. That fresh market worker is going the same route that I'm going, and you can see how he just appears out of nowhere. And that's because of this chronic hedge intrusion problem That's probably 3 weeks of growth on that hedge. This crosswalk here is not signalized. It's a dash and pray. If you just think about a mom, dog, and a stroller trying to do that. But here I am in a bike navigating all these hard right turns, and this is a chute straight across. You can see the curbs on both sides. There's no room for a couple people to pass and go different ways. So an immediate problem that could be addressed here is this issue of the dash and pray crosswalk and the design of this hedge. Even if it's trimmed back, it's only going to get trimmed back to the edge of the sidewalk. And then every week that it grows, it's intruding more and more. And pedestrians and cyclists are losing what little there is of space there. And if you are a cyclist, you know that a 6-foot sidewalk is really the bare minimum for 2 bikes to pass. Now compound this with lots more joggers and pedestrians and cyclists and shoppers. This is a recipe for an unwalkable section of the CRA. This is the driver's view of that same intersection, where drivers deal with bikes moving across because of the bike lane keyhole there to go straight, and then cars merging in from the left lane. So I stopped it here. You can see the pedestrian sign there popping out from behind the trees. This is the first spot that, as a driver, you can see someone making the move to go across there. And there's a similar visibility problem looking the other way. I measured this out to be about 110 feet based on the hedge. And compounding on top of all this is just the traffic load at commuting time at night. Drivers are often waiting multiple cycles of the light on Dixie Highway to turn right and get here, and they're then dealing with the merging traffic and finally getting clear to speed up in this turn when there's this dash and pray sidewalk there. All right, so I want to now move into some starting points for what I think could be done to this intersection. So the core of my idea is to redo this pedestrian bike infrastructure around the concept of a bidirectional spine. Right, so this is infrastructure that will handle groups of people passing each other. Think mom, dog, stroller, or pushing a cart, or e-bikes that are a little bit less maneuverable and have more weight behind their momentum, turning radius, and all that. We need to straighten this out and not have all those hard turns. The next concept of the spine is to make this an area that feels different than the highways that you're on in the surrounding areas. So it's the CRA, let's make it look and let's make it act like the CRA. If you think about turning off of Federal onto Northeast 2nd Street, you get the idea. You feel like you're in a different place. The next thing is to pull on the complete streets principles and to implement continuous sidewalks. Now, the core of what I've done here is I've changed the path from just tra-la-laing along the side of Camino Real and chunking across those entrances to actually turn them east and bring them in another 50 or 60 feet, where we can then turn everything south across those 2 lanes of entrances on a continuous sidewalk. So that keeps pedestrian and bike users at the same level as the sidewalk, but cars have to deal with just the slight ramping up and down, which helps calm the traffic in the area for safety. And then to also implement that on that high-speed right turn, where I've noted moving that unsignalized dash and pray crosswalk further west and bringing it more in a straight line across, having some kind of signalization help, but it also will greatly improve visibility for both pedestrian and for drivers. And then the next thing I did was to pull in some concepts from protected intersections where you do what you can in conflict areas to separate the kinds of traffic. And so I've put a bump out there to sharpen the turn into the Camino Square area, which will slow things down in preparation for going across the continuous sidewalk, and then bringing the bike lane into a different area in the westbound direction. So taking all that and rendering it into a visual for you is something like this, where we can use pavers to help bring that look and feel of the CRA into this area, use continuous crosswalks in those two spots, and where there's a yellow marker there, that's actually where the sidewalk level grade would drop down to the grade of the street. And so there's way fewer of those. The whole thing is straightened out. It looks and feels like CRA. It's going to help us enable the kind of participation I think we want. It's going to help enable the quality of life for Camino Square residents, and hopefully make whatever retail that's in there accessible to those not just who are living there, but also to the surrounding areas of residential. So to recap, while the traffic infrastructure may be vested for Camino Square, I question whether the pedestrian and bike is, especially in the context of 2025. We're now a Vision Zero city. We have a complete streets ordinance. Go there, look at that 6-foot sidewalk, and ask yourself, is this a complete street environment for our residents? The other concern really is it only is going to take one crash to tarnish this whole area as an unsafe place to live, work, play. I don't think anybody wants that. Everybody stands to gain by fixing this area of the CRA before it's an unwalkable area. And if we're going to suffer the pain of the construction and moving of OEs around the CRA that will bring more intensity in this area, we should overhaul the pedestrian and bike at the same time. The hedge itself, from an immediate point of view, could in fact be declared unsafe by the city manager. And then we owe it to ourselves to get ahead of this in the Vision Zero philosophy of recognizing there will be mistakes and to create infrastructure that will still be safe in spite of mistakes being made. And then as you look at alternatives, I would ask you to consider it is 2025. It is not 2018. We're not there anymore, and that e-bikes are something that we can really benefit from in our city if we do our jobs on this pedestrian infrastructure. And the way to think about it is not just one person walking or riding through, but something more like I've shown you here that has a longer turn radius, heavier weight, but yet is keeping a car off the road, especially in the context of Camino Square having a young families, one-car family. This is a way to enable the success of Camino Square as a project. And of course, the last heartburn of this infrastructure, straighten this out and widen it. And that is the essence of the spine, and that is the essence of the solution that I've put forth here. Straightening it out, widening it out, making it safe. That's what will facilitate high participation. That's what will facilitate, I believe, success of retail and residential in the Camino Square Phase 2 on behalf of the future residents of Camino Square, but also on behalf of the existing thousands of residents that live, work, and play around this area.